All right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to today's live Q&A. I see people rolling in. That's really great news and exciting. My name is Jonathan LaCour. I'm the CTO at Mission. I'm going to let people kind of come in and, while everyone's joining, I'll give you a quick explanation of kind of how we'll do things today. This is an informal event. It's all about you. It's Q&A on the topic of cost optimization for AWS. And we're using the GoToWebinar platform. And there's a couple things you should know about it. If you're interested in submitting questions, there is a section in the little GoToWebinar panel there called Questions. Very conveniently named. If you put your questions in there, I'll see them and I'll hand them out to the lovely panelists here that we have today. And maybe I'll even answer one or two of those questions if my brain's up for it, which it usually is. In addition, there's a chat section. So if you have any, feedback in there, or maybe you're having trouble hearing one of us, or you want to, us to adjust our cameras or something because you're not getting enough of this beautiful face, we can make that happen.
We're definitely getting enough of that face, Jonathan.
Let's face it, no one can ever get enough of this face.
You're getting too much of mine.
Yeah, well, fair enough. All right, so now that you've been introduced to the GoToWebinar control panel there, and you can go through and add your questions, and you can type things in the chat, let's do a quick round of introductions. As I mentioned, my name is Jonathan LaCour. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Mission. We're an AWS partner. I'll talk a little bit more about us in a moment. And while we're doing introductions, please start just tossing questions into the Q&A section. Anything you have, any questions or concerns you have around how can I save money, how can I optimize on AWS, start filling those up while we do our introductions. And I'll toss it to Jason to introduce himself next.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jason Gay. I am a senior cloud analyst here at Mission. I've been with the company for about 6 years. I've got a background in IT management, IT consulting. Got into Mission kind of accidentally about 6 years ago. A job kind of fell in my lap. And it's something that I've found a lot of interest in cost management over the years, and this is what's kind of brought me here so far.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a pleasure to work with Jason all the time, and then someone who's less of a pleasure to work with is Tim here. Just kidding. It's a great pleasure to work with Tim as well. Tim, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Tim Banks. I've been with Mission with just under a year as a technical account manager. Prior to that, I was a technical account manager with AWS. Before that, I have 2 decades of experience in operations and engineering, systems architecture, database architecture, DevOps, site reliability engineering, production SaaSes, production data stores, just a lot of tooling, automation, and monitoring. And I spend most of my time here giving technical insights and architectural insights to our customers, as well as strategies and best practices about how to optimize their engineering practices for both cost, efficiency, and resilience.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. And in addition to the Mission resources you have here, we also have from our partner CloudHealth, Justin. Justin, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. Justin Watts. I'm a senior technical account manager with CloudHealth. I've been with CloudHealth for about 3 years. So I was with CloudHealth prior to the acquisition by VMware, and I work closely with the Mission folks to help basically deliver their managed service utilizing CloudHealth.
Fantastic. Well, perfect. And in order to just frame the conversation, well, again, start tossing those questions into the Q&A section. That would be really helpful. Let me really quickly introduce who Mission is and who CloudHealth is as well. So as I mentioned, Mission is a partner of AWS. So we're actually a premier consulting partner, which is the top tier that you can get from AWS, which is pretty exciting. We're also a managed service provider, and we have a huge variety of services. So our target is to help everyone who is on AWS be successful. Right? Whether you haven't yet migrated, we can help you move there. We can optimize you. We can manage your environment for you. We do everything from cost optimization all the way through migrations, right? So, but today we're really going to focus in on cost optimization. And just a thing to note is we have a service called Cloud Foundation, which is kind of the critical starting point for cost optimization with Mission. And what you get with Cloud Foundation is you get access to a cloud analyst. someone like Mr. Jason Gay here. Throughout today's kind of Q&A, you'll learn a lot about why it's awesome to have access to someone like Jason. And you also get access to the CloudHealth, kind of platform. And that is bundled and included for free. So it's effectively a resale-driven program. You buy your AWS through Mission. We give you CloudHealth for free, and we give you kind of regular touch points with a dedicated cloud analyst like Jason, who can go into your environment, really help you save money. And we have a bunch of other programs as well. So keep tossing those questions in. That's who Mission is. Justin, maybe give us a quick snapshot of CloudHealth, the platform, and what it's all about.
Sure. So CloudHealth from early days started as really a way for customers to get a visibility and start to wrap their head around how their money was being spent in the cloud. Today, that's broadened out to governance policies, so setting guardrails to make sure that as you form these best practices, you're able to adhere to them and enforce those policies. To security, to advanced reallocation rules for chargeback and showback, and then down to recommendations. So how do I, right-size my environment? How do I take advantage of reservations and really start to lower my cloud spend?
Awesome. Yeah, and Mission actually uses the CloudHealth platform to deliver all of our cost optimization services. And the way that I always like to, and Jason actually taught me this, the phrasing we like to use for CloudHealth is it's sort of like Cost Explorer on steroids, right? It is a cloud native platform that is designed exclusively for really digging into your environment, getting in depth, doing those recommendations, and it's really, apart from the great people like Tim and Jason that make this service work, CloudHealth is really what helps us deliver it, make it sing. So perfect. Well, we've done all the introductions now. I see some questions starting to come in, which is very appreciated. Let's start with kind of asking the panel to provide an overview of kind of how you think about cost optimization in AWS. Is it a single time activity? Is it something you do periodically? Maybe give us your view on what the cost optimization journey looks like in AWS, and maybe we'll start with Jason.
All right, so I'm a big fan of not ever doing something just once. You look at something once, your environment might be dynamic, things are going to change, you're never going to maintain control of your costs. I will certainly plan with customers, talk about what their expectations are, talk about what their goals are, and then try to find ways to do things efficiently, right? We don't, you ask my wife, I'm incredibly cheap. And so that carries over into my job and it works very well for me here, but Tim's gonna laugh and make fun of me here for this, but that's okay. I always find that, your cost optimization journey is one that requires constant attention. You can't just set it and forget it. You've got to put something in place and you've got to manage it and monitor it and see what happens. Your usage might change month over month. Somebody might turn something on that you weren't aware of. And if you're not paying attention, you're going to get run over by that bus, and that bus is going to be a big, giant AWS bill.
Well said. And yes, our resident cheapskate, Jason, is absolutely the right type of person you want.
You changed my title. I like that.
That is good.
Yeah, your business cards are coming in a couple of days.
Cheapskate and chief. Tim, maybe tell us a little bit about how you view cost optimization as a journey.
So I think cost optimization is a lot like performance, resilience, and security. It's built into the architecture. You have to do it on the whiteboard first, right? So if you start designing an application or planning out your infrastructure and you don't have cost optimization in mind from the get-go, you won't be, and you'll surprise yourself with that first AWS bill, and you're going to run out of your runway, and then your startup's going to close, and then then everyone's got to start over again. But I think if you keep mindful of it from the get-go, how are we designing this? Are we designing this to be cost optimized? Or more to the point, are we painting ourselves in the corner so that we can't optimize later on? Which is a big issue that you see now. Especially, the times we're having now where companies have had to scale up or scale down, and they haven't made cost optimization an architectural consideration. You're seeing the results of that. So you want to always make sure that if it's not something that you can build into the architecture right away, at least you're giving yourself the option to switching to like a new instance type, of switching over to using spot instances, of not having to leverage gigantic instances to run this workload that maybe you can pop off into smaller ones or anything like that. And they all fit. Like if you're cost optimized, you're probably efficient, you're probably scalable, you're probably resilient. It's very rare to have one, but not all. So it's just, again, something that you have to think in from the whiteboard, from development, from operations, from monitoring. And it's not just the accounting team's consideration. It's the whole engineering team.
Absolutely. Yeah, well put, Tim, and thanks for that overview. And Justin, I'd love to get your feedback on this as well. Kind of how do you view cost optimization journey for customers?
Yeah, I think Jason and Tim are spot on. When we think about it along your cloud maturity curve, and that starts with getting visibility into what your costs are, and then it's building out what those metrics look like, and so you can manage them, and then finding ways to sort of on a regular cadence to look backs and see how you can break apart what's sort of the new infrastructure you've spun up, and what was sort of deprecated or optimized in the past, and how you sort of understand what you've saved versus what's sort of new infrastructure that's out there, and that's sort of the challenge I think Mission and CloudHealth can help provide, or the value that they can provide. But I think the value or the journey that we see is really taking the maturity curve and trying to find ways that you can sort of build these cost optimization exercises into your process and find more efficient ways to get that data and automate along the way.
Yeah, and I think the key thing, and all of you gave great answers, and Justin, I think you really captured it well. It is something that you don't do once. It isn't a switch you can flip. It is something that you have to engage in on a continuous basis, right? It's a mindset. It's an attitude, right? Just like it is when you adopt the cloud in general. So, the big, great benefit that people love about AWS is all of my resources are available to me at the snap of a finger, or more to the point, the click of a button in the console or an API request. I can spin up resources, and without any sort of guardrails in place, without any sort of strategy in place to understand, okay, these resources were spun up for this purpose, they have now served their life, they can now go away, or am I picking the right types of resources for this use case? You're going to get into a sticky situation, right? And so we encounter customers all the time who come to us after they're already in that sticky situation, and we can help them claw it back. But if you're thinking about moving to AWS, put that as an equal consideration with things like security, right, and performance. And like Tim said, is if you are keeping it in mind as a top level priority, you're going to get a lot of the other benefits as well. These things all support each other, right? A well-architected system will be cost optimized, performant, scalable. All of these things come together. So excellent. So that was a good kickoff there. Let's start answering some of the great questions that are coming in here. This is a great one. How do I go about defining an initial CloudHealth budgetary strategy, tagging, and alerting approach? And I'm actually going to start on, let's say maybe Jason, tell us a little bit about how when you first encounter a customer, how we do that when we're onboarding them into CloudHealth.
It's funny. So every business that we work with is different, and every business has different goals and different requirements for what they want to report on. There are some customers we work with that didn't even know you could do this. There are some customers that have very in-depth reporting goals. So a lot of it has to do with trying to tease it out of people and understand what's important to you. We frequently work with software development teams, and not for nothing, sometimes they're not always familiar with what the ultimate financial goals are of the organization. There might be like walls put up between the organizations internally. And I often talk to customers about it. I'm like, all right, well, what do you think your CFO might want to see on this? What do you think is important? Do you have customers, do you have individual, specific resources or infrastructure that's important to your customers? Do you have specific resources that are, dedicated by environments? We can start building out reporting for them based on that, but in order to do that, you've got to tag the resources appropriately. So you've got to really understand what your business needs are. Now, oftentimes people just don't know. So sometimes it's a little bit of, you have to give them some guidance. You got to do a little coaching, and sometimes people are, it's really rewarding for me when you start talking to a customer and they're like, I don't know what my CFO is going to want. Like, all right, well, let's start talking about it and see if we can make you look good to your CFO, and let's try to impress them. And that's actually a lot of fun, because they're like, I didn't know you could do this stuff. This is cool. And then you watch their gears start turning in their head, like, well, can I do it this way? And what if I do it this way? And that to me is what I find to be incredibly rewarding about it. I don't know if that really, there's no one specific thing we can do to help a customer here, Jonathan. I think it's just more of having that conversation and getting them to think differently.
Well, and the thing that I think is really interesting about tagging is it's just a tool. It's a mechanism, right? It's a way to say, it's a label that you put on a resource. But the power of that is you can get extremely granular, and you can decide however you want to have that lens, right? And what is your CFO going to want to see? I'll tell you right now, everything. That's what they're going to want to see. They're going to see it by cost center. They're going to see it by application. They're going to want to see it by, department, whatever, literally.
They're going to want to see trends that go downward.
Correct. So the nice thing is you don't have to pick one way to look at it. The beauty of it is tagging gives you a generic mechanism, and CloudHealth gives you this incredible reporting platform that you can create all these different perspectives and views that allow you to look at it strategically a bunch of different ways, right? So how do you go about defining that initial setup? Well, you think about, what are the types of things that I want to be able to report on? What does my CFO want to see? What does my engineering team want to see? And we can support all of those different things, and CloudHealth can absolutely provide all the capability to do that. Anything else to add on this from Tim or Justin?
I think one other thing that it's always interesting when customers or organizations start tagging, like the first time they ever really start initiating tagging, it's very, very green territory. No one really knows what to do. And people basically start by tagging development environment. Is this production? Is this staging? Is this dev?
Yep.
That's fine. If you want to tag what org owns what, that's fine. If you want to tag by cost center, that's fine. There's no wrong way to implement tagging on the first couple of passes. Right. Just do it. Just put some tags in there. It doesn't matter, right? Once you realize that you have tags in, and then you want to start seeing your data differently, that's when you can be more granular. That's when you can be more specific or less specific, or that's when you can start doing some really good aggregations across things. But just literally like Nike, just do it. Just put something in there and start from there and see what works and what doesn't for you.
Well, now I have to pay licensing fees. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, this is important. So
I'm hoping for a sponsorship.
Is the tactical, right? So we see this a lot, and Jason, we see this quite a bit with customers. Whether you're starting out in your tagging journey or not, or maybe you're making a migration to a new tagging strategy. Start doing it now, and eventually you sort of you phase out or phase into your new program. But just the very tactical here of, if you're utilizing CloudHealth in Mission, we can help you get that visibility into your resources that might not be tagged the way you want them to be in the future. We have mechanisms within the platform to help pull in things that maybe aren't tagged the way you want, but we know from a naming convention how they should be grouped, and then we can eventually put a plan together to help get to that end goal. But the point is to start now and start to get that visibility you need.
Absolutely. Awesome. So let's go to a question here from Igor. He says that he's interested in understanding if there are some tools that we would recommend that help with budgeting or automatically setting limit and stop workflow deployments that exceed allocated budgets. So this is really all about governance, right? And the answer is yes. We absolutely can help support that. So I'll let maybe Justin and maybe you can start and tell us a little bit about how that works with CloudHealth.
Yeah, sure. And so today, I think CloudHealth's a complementary feature to that. But within our governance engine, we have the ability to do sort of those power operations that you're talking about. How do I start and stop something based on some factor, whether that's a timing or you've set some sort of budgetary limit, and thus you're going to kick off a series of events. That's to an email to maybe some approvers or an authorizer that says, we need to spin down these instances at a given time and start to save some money. And that's really complementary to sort of other tools and features that Mission is using.
I was going to piggyback on that for a second too. If you go back to that tagging question a moment ago, tagging isn't just used for reporting. It can be used for things like these governance policies and rules too, right? If you want to talk about saving some cash, turn off my dev environment. Look for any resource that's got this dev tag on it or environment tag with a value of dev. Turn it off at a certain time of day. So it's not just about reporting. It's also about implementing these governance policies too.
Absolutely. And we've got a lot of expertise helping customers do this, right? Implement lights out policies, setting things up so that people can kind of vend development environments out using things like Control Tower. So there's lots and lots of things that you can do here. And I would say the native tools built into AWS plus a complementary tool like CloudHealth, and then some expertise, you're there, right? And then it's just a matter of deciding exactly what it is that you want to accomplish. Okay. So I'll mark that one as answered. Thank you, Igor, for the question. Here's another good one. And I know this question asker, David. Good to see you on today's Q&A. And the question is, what are our thoughts regarding AWS's managed services like RDS as it relates to modernization for lower cost, and what data point influenced that discussion when the service itself is more expensive? So how do we view things like RDS when it comes to cost optimization and managed services?
So I think it's an interesting conversation because utilizing a managed service solely for the purpose of cost optimization is not a wise thing to do, I don't think. You're going to do that to solve other problems, right? So do you want to maintain a fleet of EC2 instances to run on APIs, or do you want to run an API gateway, right? It's a management issue. Now you can talk about, there's a conversation you have about lower overall total cost of ownership as to whether you have to hire 17 engineers to monitor and do all these ones, and for the ease of use. But that's still normally a technical discussion. It's easier to deploy to an API gateway than it is to manage a whole fleet of instances. At that point, once you have your managed service utilized properly, then you can start tuning for cost optimization in that case. But it's not always going to be an issue where it's going to be more cost effective, right on your invoice, right, to run a managed service. There are a lot of things to consider. A managed service doesn't fit in all cases, right? And if you ask AWS, they'll tell you this managed service is going to fit 80% of cases or 90% of cases. And if you're not in one of those cases, it's not going to work for you. The Elasticsearch service is a great example, where for most people, if you're using Elasticsearch, it's fine. It's great. It's going to do what you want to. If you have some edge use cases, if you need to have some tuning parameters, turn some knobs, special features, it's not for you. It doesn't matter how much it costs. It's just not going to be the right thing for you. So when it comes to using managed services specifically for cost optimization or for lower total cost, that's a pretty in-depth conversation. And when we talk about what data points influence whether it's more expensive or not, it's all going to be very, very individualized to the use case. It's all going to be very, very individualized to the organization, how they want to use it, what their long-term goals are, what their spending now is, what their reservation strategy looks like. And AWS is being really, forthcoming about trying to do some things to lower the spend on some of these managed services, whether it's reserved instances or hopefully, knock on wood, savings plans for RDS coming in reInvent. Hopefully, that's a prediction. But again, and that's a good conversation to have as part of the overall conversation of whether to utilize a managed service, but it should not be the driving factor for you to utilize a managed service.
Right. Yeah. You nailed it, Tim. Like, to me, it's not, the managed services are fantastic, but the benefit the primary and first benefit isn't cost optimization, right? Is it going to drive a lower overall TCO? Absolutely. I think that's definitely true, but that's not your motivator, right? You're getting there because you're saying, I have people spending a lot of time in cycles managing infrastructure, managing these systems. And if I move to a managed service, I can redeploy those people on other things. So it's about increasing your velocity. It's about improving your overall capability to deliver. It's about not being distracted by things that don't matter to you. Will that drive down your overall cost? I think so, yes. But to me, it's like, it's unlike something like reserved instances. Reserved instances are purely a financial mechanism, right? That's their purpose. Their purpose is save you money by committing, right? Whereas a managed service is there a benefit from a cost perspective? Yes, but it's much more complicated than that. And there are tons of other benefits too. So, you know, definitely to clarify, Tim is saying the managed services are good. It's just your primary motivator is likely not going to be like, oh, this is a financial mechanism for me to save money. So good question, David. Okay, so I got some interesting questions here, and there's kind of two that are related from Michael. Cost optimization AI tools and controls for keeping users from inadvertently doing things. So I think we've addressed the second question already around governance, right? But when it comes to AI, using AI to monitor cost, right? I think, you know, the answer is there are some things that people would call AI that help with that, but realistically, what you're really looking at is trending, right? It's a little bit simpler than that and less exciting from a branding perspective. But, you know, there are absolutely tools and reports within CloudHealth that I think solve this challenge that you're asking about, Michael. Anybody have anything to add to that?
I want to say, like, it may sound like semantics, but there is a difference between AI and ML. In a case like this, when you're doing cost optimization analysis, you're talking about machine learning, not artificial intelligence. And there are tools out there that do use machine learning to analyze trends in what your spend is and look for anomalies in that. There are some things you can do as far as budget alerting within AWS console itself, which does that to some extent. There are some more you know, premium tools that you can buy that are going to look for those as well. There are a number of you know, open source and other projects out there that you can use that you can run on your own infrastructure to look for anomalies as they come up. There are some governance tools that were mentioned before. Amazon itself uses some machine learning to do cost optimization if you're using S3 intelligent tiering. Where it uses analysis of access patterns in your objects to figure out whether something should be in a more expensive or less expensive storage tier. So there are a number of tools that use AI and ML, but that's, again, it's going to depend on how you're using it, is which one's going to be the right one for you.
Well put.
I think looking at that too, just for a second, you know, I liken this back to my days as a Windows system admin, right? Everyone's like, I need the best antivirus software out there. And I'm like, all right, well, you know, antivirus software is antivirus software. It's all reactive. You can't fight what you don't know about. You can look for patterns, but it's always, those patterns are always based on things that you've seen. And I think cost management and cost optimization in general is a lot of the same type of mentality. You can certainly get really close to being real time with it, but the only way you're ever gonna be proactive with it is to think about it in advance and understand what you're gonna deploy in advance. But you still have to go back and look at, well, how did this actually do? So it's still about, you know, I think from our standpoint, we're not waiting until the end of the month until a bill goes out to tell a customer, oh, by the way, you spun this stuff up earlier in the month, and why were you running all these P3 2X larges? Oh, we weren't using those? Yeah, you spun them up like 3 weeks ago. No, you don't do that. Like you have to be on the ball, and you got to look at that quickly. And that's one of the things that CloudHealth really helps us to do is, you know, we have billing alarms that we set up for every one of our customers. And if there's an increased spend that comes up that's unexpected, we're getting an alert on that, and we're going to go reach out and talk to them. But I guess it's being reactive, but it's being reactive really quickly.
Yeah.
And I think the proactive aspect we talk about, when we've recommended customers before to use things like control tower, setting up guardrails that prevent people from being able to spin up certain expensive resources either at all or without otherwise approval. You can use entire account vending machines basically, where here's your account, all the guardrails are set up, all the IAM permissions are set up. Go do what you're ever going to do, and we know it's never going to cost us more than $1,000, or never get out of the free tier or whatever it is. Those are some of the more proactive things you can do. But like Jason said, once something has already been spun up, the onus is on us as experts and people to help you try and lower your cost, and you as the people that own the account to be on top of those kinds of things and to examine your cost and resource usage, set up alarms and things like that to say, hey, wow, someone did spin up this U12 machine just to to run a quick server on. Like, why are we doing that? And so yeah, there are tools there. It requires, as they say in Harry Potter, constant vigilance to make sure you're not spending a whole lot of money.
All right, another copyright violation from Tim. Perfect. I'm messing with it. I got to
kick back from the lawyers.
I think we need to go for the hat trick today, man. One more.
got
one more somewhere.
A clarification from Michael. He was saying, on his question around AI machine learning, he was saying he actually works at a place where they have government agencies where they need to budget for months or years in advance. So it's really about forecasting and predictive kind of views and things. And I think that can absolutely be driven by some data in the past. And maybe the group here can talk a little bit about how we help customers to forecast what their cost might look like in the future based upon data that we have in the present, right?
I mean, yeah. I think it's. Oh, go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think just from the sort of CloudHealth, sort of platform view, CloudHealth gives you sort of the visibility of 13 months back of data. So you have a good source of data to trend. So you can start to see where is it cyclical? Are you seeing spikes at certain times? So you can sort of, take the necessary cautions when you expect those spikes to occur, but also start to, if you're seeing steady climbs in the previous months, this is where, really the folks at Mission are excellent at coming in and saying, look, we're seeing, a 10 or 15%, increase month over month here. We don't really see more, number of VMs. We are seeing more expensive VMs. Maybe there's some zombie infrastructure out there that's, for whatever reason, it's being left and not optimized or deprecated as it should be. So I think the visibility of a platform utilizing CloudHealth, but also, back to setting up some of those governance policies and budgets, so that when you cross these barriers that your organization has set, you get alerted and you're able to take the necessary action.
Yeah, and I think to the point of asking about like predictive tools, don't get me wrong, you can dump enough cost and usage reports and detailed billing reports into a data store and have some really brilliant data scientists pour over it and give you a prediction on what they think it's going to spend over the next several years. And you're going to get a number, right? And you can operate on that number. But one of the things I think that I really like about what we do here at Mission is that we get old people like Jason, who's very old, and people like me who are less old but still very experienced, who can come in here and use our expertise, and I can say that because we're all pretty smart people here, but our expertise and our experience, and say, hey, look, this is what I'm seeing from you over time, but this is what I think is going to happen based on these factors, right? And that's not something you're going to get from the numbers, right? Yeah. For example, when we've got customers who are doing gaming and gaming metrics and advertisements on gaming, when the pandemic hit, we were like, hey, these people are going to take off because everyone is home playing games right now and not doing stuff. And we were able to meet with them and say, hey, you need to make these changes for scalability. Let's get you these things to cost optimize. Let's make sure you have scaling. Do you need service limits increase and stuff like that? And that's not something that you're going to get from a BI tool, right? You need people with experience who are going to be able to recognize those things. So that's why it's important. Go ahead.
Quick question for you. How long after you generate a predictive report until it's wrong?
It's wrong when you generate it.
Boom. right? So I think like it's not that you shouldn't do these things or think this way or forecast out, right? The other thing is, how often has AWS decreased their prices?
All the time.
It's nonstop, all the time. And how often do they introduce new mechanisms for saving money, new types of reservations, savings plans,
Daily.
right? All the time. And so to me, like, can you do these things? You absolutely can. And I would just say you should put your effort in there light, right? Because it's more about trending and forecasting and budgeting, just kind of to understand what the capacity is going to be needed financially. But I'd rather spend more time leveraging all the things that are being introduced on a regular basis, right? To drive down the overall cost and to leverage things like savings plans and to really dig in there. So I completely get it, right? Because if you're going out to a government agency and you're having to go to them and say, this is what the forecast is going to look like, you know, be conservative about it, be careful about it, and, you know, trend line it, right? But I think using machine learning or, you know, deep data analytics, you could spin your cycles a lot, and you're just going to have wrong data or wrong conclusions within moments, right, after generating it. So for me, it's sort of like flipping it on its head a little bit. All right. I do want to go back. Igor has a follow-up to his to the question that David asked around managed services, and he basically is curious: is there a way that you can track the cost of a self-managed service, like running your own Elasticsearch cluster, and add it into a TCO so that the cost can be compared to a similar managed service on AWS? But
You absolutely can, and we have customers that we've done that for. You know, you're going to take the cost of the instances wherever it's running, cost of licensure, if anything, that's a predictable and known cost. And then you can estimate the cost of engineering hours it takes to operate that. But yeah, the cost for self-hosted is very predictable and very known. It's just like running any other instance.
yep.
You know, if you've got a 10 node Elasticsearch cluster, you know how much those 10 nodes are going to cost you. If you have, you know, XPack and the full commercial license, you know how much that's going to cost you. You can predict that out very well. As far as scaling goes, if you're doing log ingest, that's usually pretty predictable. You know what that's going to look like over time, and so you can estimate those costs fairly well. And like I said, when you're talking about the overall TCO, you're looking at engineering hours, you're looking at your monitoring, you're looking at and all these other things that don't show up on an invoice. Those are usually pretty easily estimated as well. And then when you're looking at comparing the cost of a managed service, those are usually pretty predictable as well. They've got published prices. Again, you can use cluster size estimators to figure out how much you're going to use. Obviously, you can deduct some amount of engineering hours. And then, you know, then you can look at, okay, well, I have a compute savings plan or a reserved instance for these, and that's going to save me this much versus a reserved instance for this much. So there's definitely an analysis that can be done. It's not dramatically hard math, but it's absolutely something that can be done. And I think more of the points should be done whenever you're looking at using a managed service.
Totally agree. Anything to add from anyone else?
You hit the nail right on the head.
Perfect. All right. Ooh, this is a really good one that just came in. Very timely topic. In our professional experience, are there verticals that are more susceptible to others that desire cost optimization of their cloud infrastructure during COVID? So I will say, and I'm sure that Justin is going to be able to say the same thing, the first half of this year has been very interesting in terms of the demand for cost optimization services. We have seen a huge spike in it, right? Because every vertical has some challenge that they're facing that ties in, right? And so I'll give you an example. Mission has a lot of media and entertainment customers. So customers in media and entertainment have absolutely been impacted in a pretty significant way. And so they have to have a strategy that says, how can we get from here to the other side of this? And so they absolutely has been a spike there. There are other verticals as well. So to me, yes, in my professional experience, there are verticals that are more susceptible. And the interesting thing about that to me is the mechanisms that you can employ to drive optimization in those verticals can sometimes be drastically different, right? So, you know, for example, if you're in a business where as a result of COVID, demand on your actual workload has decreased, that is one thing you can do. You can actually ramp down the resources to serve that need. You're aligning that demand with the resources that you create are deploying, and that produces cost savings, right? But for others, it's a completely different problem. Maybe they're seeing a huge spike, and maybe you have to align the types of resources you deploy better. So it's going to really vary depending on the vertical. Anybody want to add or build on that?
Yeah, I think too, some verticals, I think you see some more risk because some verticals are more apt to want to do things like, hey, let's sign a 3-year EDP with a commitment, right? Works great until COVID hits. And then all of a sudden, well, now I'm really going to have a hard time meeting that commitment. And so the risk looks different depending. If you've got, startups that tend to not want to make those kinds of commitments, they tend to be a little more agile and be able to make those kind of decisions to scale up or scale down as necessary without a lot of commitment. And that's why a program like Rio makes a lot of sense for some of these companies, where you can say, hey, I really want to like reap some of the benefits of having reserved instances, but I don't necessarily know if I want to have that commitment where if I am affected by the economy for whatever reason, or I do have to scale down, where I'm now on the hook to meet these meet these commitments.
Right.
And we have had several customers that have greatly benefited from that, especially now.
Yeah, Tim, thank you for bringing that up. And just for the benefit of the audience here, Rio is a program that we created at Mission, stands for Reserved Instance Optimization. So, RIs is definitely a question that I see now in the list. And reserved instances are a way for you to go in and say, I commit to this, to buying and purchasing this resource over some period of time. The longer you commit, the greater your discount, right? And the big challenge in the uncertain time is this is a great financial mechanism to save money, but there's a lot of unknown and risk. And so people are reticent to do that. So what Rio does is, we as a partner, we have many customers, hundreds of customers that are all a part of our program. And as a result of that, we can de-risk across those customers and we can pass those savings on to the customer. So what we do is we actually purchase and drive the RIs into the customer's account. We take on the commitment, we take on the burden. And oh, by the way, with RIs, you save more money if you put money up front, but we'll do that on your behalf. We'll provide all of the capital. And what we're doing is effectively sharing in that savings. So to me, Rio is like a built for the COVID era service, right? It is, I want to drive maximum cost optimization using RIs. I want to have minimal cost outlay out of my cash, right? So that I can have more cash in the bank to ride through this uncertain time. And oh, by the way, I don't want to have to hire a whole bunch of resources who are experts at, deep reporting and deploying RIs and, keeping them up to date and selling them on the marketplace. We're going to do all that for you. So it's sort of like, sign me up, I'm off I go. Low risk, high savings. And we have another program called IDP, which is the instant discount program. That drives a lower level of savings, but there's no risk and no contract. So you just sign up and we'll give you up to 5% off your bill on a monthly basis for 12 months. Done, right? Like it's super easy. So I think that's sort of like one of the benefits of working with a partner is, like, frankly, because of our scale and our ability to engage with many customers, we can leverage that to provide benefit across the board in a much more aggressive way than you can do on your own.
Yeah, one of the interesting pieces about that whole Rio program, Jonathan, is that most customers have come to us. They come on board. They've made some investment in reserved instances or savings plans, but they're software development shops, right? The majority of people we work with are developers. Their focus is to develop code and to build applications. Their focus is not sitting there saving money, and it's not always paying attention to it. So we find people come on board, they might have 20-30% coverage of RIs, if anything. Sometimes there's nothing, and unless you're going to actively manage it, you're not going to get great results out of that. So by taking advantage of one of these programs, it basically puts all this on autopilot for you. We'll get you to like 85 to 90% covered, see some significant savings at minimal risk to you, and you can recognize that right away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well said.
I was just going to add to that, Jason. Without the sort of active management of those reservations, what we end up seeing is people spending more money than they anticipated. So, going over and above what they, would have paid it had they not purchased reservations. So there's definitely a lot of risk in trying to manage those if you don't have a practice around that. So there's a lot of value in the RIO program.
For sure. And a lot of times people in times like what's going on right now, people tend to get, they can get into a panic and they can get a little bit penny wise, pound foolish, as they say. So an example of this is, we've seen people who end up coming to us because they were on CloudHealth, they were using it, but they didn't have the expertise in house. They weren't able to fully deploy and take advantage of it because, just like Jason says, they're out there trying to generate revenue and deploy new services and build new applications to delight their customers, and that's great. But they'll maybe turn off CloudHealth, and then things will spiral out of control, even though they had a light hand on it. So what we do, oftentimes, what customers will come to us and say, "Hey, you know what? I really did need this. I just didn't know how to deploy it." And the beauty of joining up with Mission in this regard is we just give it to you for free, right? So you kind of accomplish both. You're getting all of the benefit of CloudHealth, you're getting all of our expertise, and now you're not having to pay for it, which is sort of nice at the end of the day. Anything else anybody wants to add on this topic before we move to the next question?
Nope.
All right. So I think the next kind of category that I think we should touch on is sort of cost optimized architecture, right? And we talked a little bit about, kind of managed services, but there are lots of other, architectural decisions you can make that can kind of help you cost optimize. Maybe open up to the floor for any best practices on that regard.
Yeah, I think the main architectural consideration when you're talking about cost optimization is you want to use the least amount of compute possible to do something, right? So if you just need to do API routing, you don't need an instance for that. You don't need an R5. You don't need a T2, right? You can use a Lambda. You can use the API gateway, right? That's the first and foremost thing. You're talking about minimizing your costs tremendously just to do just enough to do this thing, whatever that thing is. And then if you need more of that thing, you can scale that thing up specifically. Like you can tune a very specific thing. If you have your API in various parts and various microservices and you need to scale one out and maybe one section of that needs to be on containers or something like that, or maybe one, heaven forbid, does have to be instantiated, you can tune that one part, right? But if you have a very monolithic architecture, if you scale one, you scale all. And that's the most expensive way to do something. I think another architectural consideration is making sure that your storage is as cheap as possible, right? You don't have to have everything on an EBS volume. The cheaper you can get that storage, the better. So if you can pull something out of S3, pull something out of S3. You don't have to keep logs, don't keep logs, right? In the year of our Lord, 2020, nobody needs to keep a log on an instance. Please, if there's anything that you do for the rest of your life, never store a log on an instance. You can log to CloudWatch, you can log directly to S3. There's way better stuff than just storing logs on SSDs because money is cheap and we're just going to burn through it.
But you don't print money?
I can't say that. This is being recorded. But no, those are the kind of things. Use just enough to do whatever the job you're doing is. The other thing I think people need to understand is that it's not just your cost optimization for like how little my bill can be, but how much does downtime cost, right? Downtime is expensive usually. So if you're not resilient in your architectural considerations, you are going to burn money when you go down, right? And so you have to keep that in mind. And what people look at instead of, they say, well, in order for me to have another instance of this, or in order for me to have a read replica in a different region, or is it in a different availability zone, or in order for me to spin up have a copy of this data somewhere, that's going to cost me money. And they look at that as it's going to cost me this much money. And one of the conversations that we have to have with people that's a really difficult conversation for them to have is, I need you to put a price on how much an hour of downtime costs, and then how much 6 hours of downtime costs and how much a day of downtime costs,
Yeah.
right? And those don't scale linearly usually, right? Because if someone can't get to your site for 5 minutes, that's bad. If someone can't get to your site for an hour, they may never come back, right? So these are things that people really don't consider. And these are, again, this is why it behooves you to hire people with experience that can tell you you're not considering these things. And
Yeah.
once you have these conversations, and when you look at it not from how much is my invoice going to be, but from what am I cost optimized as overall operation, right? When you look at it from that standpoint, it makes sense because downtime is expensive and sometimes it can
And
cost you your entire business.
to add to that as well, like I think the architectural changes can often align your engineering teams with your financial goals, right? So
Absolutely.
like Jason was saying earlier, that's not usually top of mind for an engineer. You know, what's top of mind for an engineer is things like performance, right? And, you know, efficiency is important to an engineer. We care about that. I'm a developer. I like to write code. And one of the things that always made me angry years ago, kind of in the pre-cloud days, is when I would want to like invest some of my own time or my team's time in refactoring. And the answer would frequently be like, well, what's the ROI on that, right? And if you have a highly monolithic application where you have everything kind of wedged onto single EC2 instances and you're doing this like mega scaling and, you know, horizontal and vertically, but everything is very monolithic, it's really difficult for you to justify, right? And so developers and finance are at odds with each other. If you make some architectural decisions to do things like build out your compute on top of Lambdas, guess what? Now you're directly aligning, you know, I want to optimize this function. What's the ROI? Well, currently I'm spending exactly this much each month on this function's number of invocations, right? If I optimize that by 30%, that reduces 30% of the cost. There's your exact ROI. So breaking things up and putting things into microservices and tagging, it helps you be more strategic. It helps you align the engineering goals with the financial goals. So the architecture, it ultimately matters a lot because it gets everyone on the same page, above and beyond just the pure benefits from, you know, kind of scaling and so on, right?
I think too, to that point too, there's the thing I think most people can do now is to be as stateless as possible, right? In your infrastructure. Again, if storage is the thing that you need for state, make it as cheap as possible. Put it in S3, put it in an EFS volume that you can attach from anywhere. But the more stateless you can make your operations, the much less expensive they can be. You know, if you have containers, you can run them on spot instances, right? If you have to run instantiated, you can run them on spot instances. You can run them on the barest amount of CPU. You can run them on like a little T2 and let them turn away until they do their thing, depending on what your workload is. If you need to have, you know, more higher performance stuff, you can utilize different things if things are platform agnostic, right? For example, you've been using these R5s all this time and they've been working great, but hey, you can use an R6G, the Graviton processors, and save 20% off the top of that because you have made something that can run anywhere.
Yeah, that is a great example, Tim. Like this is a whole new world that people now have. Speaking to earlier, AWS is constantly releasing new things. Graviton represents a huge opportunity, right? This is a way lower cost silicon for them, right? They can produce high performance at low cost. And if you have a workload that can be adapted to that, you can save a lot of money, right? And by the way, that's something that Mission can help you with if you need it, for what it's worth. Anybody else have anything to add on the architectural side?
Yeah, I was going to talk a little bit about spot instances, and I can give you a real life example of this. So we have a customer who runs an online dating site, and we were working with them recently about what, you know, they've seen an incredibly huge influx in usage since COVID started in the March timeframe because people aren't going anywhere. So, you know, it's all these online video chats and stuff like that, right? So there's some pretty interesting stuff they're doing with it. Well, fascinatingly enough, I can't even say that word, their usage has gone up significantly from a customer standpoint. Like they have members that are constantly logging into their site, but their costs have not. And the way they've managed that is they've built out these auto scaling groups for these video chat instances that they're running. They're running a little bit of an older application, but the way the auto scaling groups were built 2 instances are minimum in the group, right? Those are always running as either on demand or they're reserved. But anything else that gets built out and added on, it's all coming on as spot instances. And as they were going in and adding these spot instances, we found something really interesting. As people have started to move away from older instance types, there are a lot more of these older instance types that are available in the spot market. So I'm sitting there looking at it and I'm going, why the heck are we running all these M3s? And he's like, oh, because I can get them dirt cheap right now. Like, I mean, like, it's a fire sale. Like, so you can get some of these instances like that just are either not necessarily ready to be retired, but aren't in high demand anymore, and you can get them dirt cheap, and you can run higher performance versions of it too. You can run a larger instance if you want to, and you can run jobs quicker. And it was actually just an interesting way of looking at it. Like, I didn't even think of doing it that way, but that was actually pretty cool and an interesting way to use it.
Nice. So quick time check. We have about 5 minutes left. So if you have any more questions, folks, please drop them in the Q&A or drop them in the chat. It's been a really great conversation so far, and I like how we've gotten to touch on a whole bunch of different topics. Before we close, I will watch out for questions, but I did want to talk a little bit about the financial mechanisms we talked about earlier, RIs versus savings plans, and kind of that entire world. Does anybody want to give a little view on the complexity there and how people can kind of wrangle it?
Yeah, I can do that, and because when I was at AWS is when they were coming out with the savings plan and kind of what their overall strategy was. And RIs, for the most part, you have to be pretty granular on. You have to be granular on a region. You have to be granular on at least an instance family. You have to be granular on an operating system. And then you have to figure out, even if you do get convertibles, there are only certain types you can go within. And there's just a lot of management that goes along with that. And if you have to change, and what you also get is lock-in, right? Well, we've reserved these C4s for 3 years, so we're going to be on these C4s for 2 more years after this, right? Savings plans are much more flexible. If you get a compute savings plan, you can use it on anything that's EC2, whether it's EC2 instances, whether it's Lambda, whether it's ECS or EKS Fargate. It all works. It works across regions. It works across instance types. It's irrespective of operating system. Savings plans are much easier for the customer to manage, and frankly, they're much easier for AWS to manage. The caveat with that is that because of the flexibility in exchange, you're exchanging some of your savings potential, right? Because you can be very granular with reserved instances, you can save more, but it's also because you're committing to something, which is why you get that savings.
Right.
It's less of a commitment for savings plans, so it does cost you a little more. When I say cost you save a little less actually. But I think that freedom is what kind of is what's appealing and what makes it a better option in most cases. If you are still reserving instances in 2020 and you're thinking about reserving them for 3 more years, that should be the edge case, right? Where you say for 3 years, we're going to use the same instance type. For most people, I think 3 years is too long to commit to using any kind of instance. And so you definitely want to look at using a compute savings plan.
Yep.
And that's kind of, I think, why AWS is probably moving in that direction overall.
Well said. Yeah, and I did see a question. Does Mission also use savings plans on Rio? And the answer is we deploy every tool in our tool belt. And as AWS continues to add more and more options, we deploy them. So yes, we will use savings plans and use reserved instances. We'll use anything we can to drive optimization in the customer environment. All right, we have time for one more question here that we saw flow in, and I think Justin, you'll be able to answer this one. It's a question about CloudHealth. Is there a way to tie AWS CloudWatch alerts into CloudHealth?
So we tie into CloudWatch, not necessarily for alerts, but what we do is we pull, if you've got some of the advanced CloudWatch metrics you've enabled. So for things like right sizing your instances, we will be able to pull those in. But from an alerting perspective, we've got our own sort of feature set there that we use and don't necessarily pull in the CloudWatch metrics into those, or the CloudWatch alerts into that. We did recently enable AWS config rules. So if you're utilizing config rules currently natively within AWS, that is functionality that CloudHealth supports, and you can fully utilize CloudHealth platform for your sort of one source to manage your cloud.
Excellent. All right. Well, folks, we are at the end of our time. I want to thank Justin, Jason, and Tim for joining for this Q&A session. It's always extremely fun to banter around with these folks, and thank you everyone who came today for the great questions. We'll do more of these over the coming months, and stay safe, stay healthy. If you need to get in touch with us, you can reach out to us at missioncloud.com through our website, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much.
Take care, guys. Thank you.
See y'all.
Thanks.
I know.